for having me.
All right, sir. So let's
Good
get
afternoon.
all right. Let's get straight to the issue of the day. The first question anybody is asking, particularly economists, financial experts in Nigeria today, is that what is your assessment of Dr. Yemi Cardoso-led CBN governor?
I think the current CBN governor, Mr. Yemi Cardoso, has not done badly. On the whole, he has not done badly. He has pursued orthodox monetary policy. And I know that the overarching objective of the monetary authorities is to achieve price stability. And inflation is not yet on target, I know, but if you look at it largely, it's not really completely out of control. And because of the central bank, because they have tried all the tricks in the book in a bid to achieve price stability. And particularly for exchange rate, I know Nigerians might not be happy because the naira now is exchanging for something in the region of 160 to the dollar. But if you look at it, it has largely remained within a band of 1516 for a while. So it has the central bank under Yemi Cardoso has achieved foreign exchange stability, largely okay. And for price stability, they're doing everything humanly possible. I know it's not about the efforts, it's about the results. But I think they're doing a bit.
Exactly.
And one thing I think...
Go ahead, sir.
One thing I think that is limiting the capacity of the Central Bank of Nigeria under Yemi Cardoso in achieving its overarching mandate of price stability is because the fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities are working at cross purposes. While the monetary authorities embark on contractionary monetary policy, the fiscal authorities, on the other hand, are not meeting the monetary authorities halfway, in the sense that they embark on expansionary fiscal policy. And eventually, if they are working at cross purposes, they cancel out. So despite the tightening of the central bank to bring price to target, the central bank wants to achieve maybe 21%. Funny enough, the federal government in its budget is even targeting less than the central bank. But you're embarking on expansionary fiscal policy that fuels inflation. So that's not really, that's counterintuitive as far as the knowledge of economics is concerned.
Very
fiscal authorities.
Exactly. Very interesting from you, Doc. But when you said the fiscal authority are banking on expansionary, project that contravene the aspect of what CBN is doing. But a lot of Nigerians who also want to, from your own angle, can you explain that expansionary angle of the fiscal policy of the government? Because that's where many people want to see road, want to see hospital, want to see some of the gigantic projects. But as it stands today, does that contradict what the monetary policy is all doing in terms of price stability? Can you help us explain that?
Well, I understand what the federal authorities, or even the government at the state level, the different governments, different states are doing. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a lot of roads, to have infrastructure, to achieve as much as possible. Mind you, have a new government in place. And I remember when the current president was campaigning, he said it's about hitting the ground running. So I think it's time to achieve as much as possible and as quickly as possible. So I understand that part. But the thing about macroeconomic policies, the thing is about balancing act. Exactly. It's about priorities. It's about trade-offs. So if you are prioritizing spending on infrastructure, on welfare of the people, somebody says, every time they ask, they shall rise. So it's been something. I know it may not go around, but at least some people benefit from it. So they're trying to achieve a lot of things. But by trying to spend a lot, by trying to spend beyond your revenue, because what we have been having, even before the current government, is deficit budgeting. So deficit budgeting is expansionary in nature, in the sense that you're spending more than you're getting. So that fuels inflation. That's not contractionary in nature. And if you are trying to achieve, because they're forecasting 15%, I mean, the budget is forecasting 15%. You remember when the budget was passed, they indicated 15%. That's a target this year. But you cannot be embarking on expansionary policy, macroeconomic policy, and you think you can tame inflation from maybe, I know it has come down recently,
Exactly.
but last year it was even in the mid-30s. So you're bringing it by, you're reducing it by more than half, and you're embarking on expansionary fiscal policy. So that doesn't order well. So the monetary authorities might be doing their bit, but that is not enough, because all of them have to, that synergy is there. That coordination, the fiscal monetary coordination is very key. So they have to work together if they want to achieve good results.
Exactly. Now, working together is very key. And I understand that members of the MPC also consist members of the Ministry of Finance. So we hope that they can both work together. Now, looking at today's meeting and tomorrow's meeting, today 19th, tomorrow 20th, the MPC meeting is already ongoing right now in Abuja. Although they may be on break right now, based on information I'm getting, they're on break. They will resume back by 2 o'clock to continue the meeting till tomorrow by 8 a.m. But one thing that many Nigerians who are concerned about MPC meeting are always looking at is that, and I will ask you this question. In your own understanding, do you think they are going hawkish? Because a lot of people are pointing to the direction that CBN may go hawkish on the MPC rate this time around. So what's your own take on that?
Well, you know, they normally look at external conditions.
Exactly.
And internal conditions. So domestically, I know inflation is easing. It has eased between the numbers that came out for April. It showed that it has reduced, the headline inflation has reduced by 50 basis, more than 50 basis points. So that's good. And if you look at the exchange rate, it's largely stable. I know sometimes it can be a bit tight, because despite the accretion in the foreign exchange reserves, because you're talking about more than 40 billion gross foreign exchange reserves, and even the net, we're doing something north of 23 billion. So externally, if you look at the foreign exchange reserves, if you look at inflation, if you look at the growth, I think the central bank can say, all right, things are largely okay. But the issue is that, and also for the external environment, if you look at the trade war impact by Donald Trump,
exactly,
he has also put things on hold now, at least for the next 90 days, particularly between the United States and China, and even for the other countries. And the Ukrainian war, they're trying to wind down the war. So these things are good for the economy, whether for the Nigerian economy, whether domestically or externally. However, if I were in the position of the central bank, if I were part of the monetary policy committee, I think it's safer to hold than to hike, or even to reduce or to cut. I think it's safer, because this, we have new inflation methodology.
Exactly.
So I think they should adopt a wait-and-see strategy and see how things pan out. And if things look more sustainable, even the easing is more sustainable, then they can say, oh, no, for sure, we are doing well, and maybe we need to cut interest rates. But
exactly.
If the things do not really go well, and if you look at it, the core inflation, which is the real mandate, where the central bank actually can move the needle, is not doing as well as the food inflation, which is not really within the remit of the central bank. So the central bank has a lot of work to do. But I will not advise it to hike interest rates. I think the best policy is to hold for now.
Exactly.
And then around the monetary policy rate, they can tweak the asymmetric corridor if need be, maybe to ensure that things are on target eventually.
Talking about the asymmetric corridor as of today is 500 slash minus 100. So are you saying that they should come down a little above what they are right now? Oh, we're having a network freeze right there. Although the doctor is suggesting that for now, for him, Okay, are you there, doctor?
Hello?
I'm there. Are you there for me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Oh, all right, yes. But I couldn't hear you. I don't know if you can repeat the question, please.
Okay, what I'm trying to say is that the current asymmetric corridor rate is about 500 slash minus 100. That's what they have maintained. But you are saying that they should come down a little. So what would be your suggestion to that in that regards?
You know, the asymmetric corridor is
yes, it's a plus 500 slash minus 100.
Standing lending.
Yes.
So it's about standing lending facility and standing deposit facility.
Exactly.
If a deposited money bank wants to keep some money with central bank, that means when it keep some money with the central bank, it expects that money to generate some interest. And then sometimes too, the deposit money bank might decide to borrow from the central bank. That's the standard lending facility now. The central bank also charges it. So in a bid for the central bank to mob up liquidity, it may decide to increase the positive side of the asymmetric corridor to encourage the deposit money banks to keep more money with them instead of making the money to circulate within the economy. And then on the other hand, if the monetary authorities feel there is a need to spur some growth, to allow some money to circulate within the economy, it might discourage deposit money banks from keeping money with them, generating interest by reducing the interest rate that the standing deposit facility to the barest minimum. And I think if I were in the position of the central bank, I may tweak the asymmetric corridor more than I would tweak the monetary policy rate, the asymmetric corridor around it, in such a way that I will not bring down the cost of credit, because I'm not sure about inflation, how sustainable it is, how it can be sustained. But I can, on the other hand, spur growth within the economy by discouraging the deposit money banks from keeping money with me to generate interest by reducing the standing lending facility rate for the deposit money banks.
Exactly. Very interesting. I love the perspective you gave that particular angle or asymmetric corridor of the banks, the plus 500 and the minus 100. But let's now take a look at the one that affect ordinary Nigerians, talking about the ones that Manufacturers Association have cried out mostly. The 27.50% on your side, even though you said they should maintain, but OPS, Organized Private Sector, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, and other concerning individuals are saying that no, this 27.50 is still a little bit high. So what would be your suggestion in this regard?
All right, let me quote President Bola Tinubu. I feel the pain of the Manufacturing Association.
That's serious.
The president keeps saying that in his speech that he feels the pains of Nigeria. So in the same manner, I feel the pains of manufacturers in Nigeria. I feel the pains of organized private sector in Nigeria. But the truth is, the central bank has one overarching mandate. The raison d'etre for the existence of monetary authorities is price stability. Any other thing is secondary to that. And achieving price stability is not a painless policy. Thirdly, costs of credit has to go up. That is the conventional way of bringing down inflation. So, and the thing is, when inflation is high, that erodes the purchasing power of not only the consumer, I think even for the manufacturers, because their own purchasing power is also being eroded. The capacity of the money that they have, the cash, or the credit that they have to buy things will also be eroded when inflation is high. And then even the consumers, when the consumers cannot afford what they're selling, then what's the need of manufacturing those things? So I think the central bank is doing a favor, not only to consumers, but even to the manufacturers by trying to protect our purchasing power. And it's a temporary measure. If things stabilize, if inflation is largely within target, the central bank will start normalizing. And that's when it starts pursuing those policies that will highly favor businesses by bringing down the anchor rate and the interest rates and so on. But for now, the most important thing for now is price stability. As painful as it is to businesses and even to individuals that want to borrow to invest, it has to come, their cost of credit has to be second to price stability. So we hope that we achieve price stability quickly so that we can bring down the cost of credit to a level that will be comfortable to businesses and to individuals.
Exactly. I really like your angle of bringing about this issue of price stability, because we know that one of the core work of any central bank across the world is to ensure price stability. But there's a second part of that work that has to do with employment. Employment is one of the key functions of employment, or bringing down unemployment situation in the country. But we have seen less statement pronouncement from central bank in that regard. And even though Dr. Cardoso said he's going through the route of orthodox monetary policy, we haven't seen much in that regard. And this MPC meeting, as we speak right now, just like you rightly pointed out, they will be focused on price stability. They will leave out the issue of unemployment issue in Nigeria. But from your own angle, what do you think they need to do in this regard? Because unemployment, looking at the rate, looking at the number, is also very key and one of the core work of Central Bank of Nigeria.
Yes, if you look at the Federal Reserve, which is arguably the most powerful central bank in the world, the Federal Reserve in America, Jim Powell speaking, the president of the Fed chief in America, he always emphasizes the dual mandate of the Fed. He always emphasizes that, which is price stability and full employment. For ours, and for most countries around the world, for majority of central banks around the world, is not framed in that way. It's normally price stability taking over. And even for the Fed, which is like the model because it's number one, people tend to follow their lead. I remember the European Central Bank, as powerful as the European Central Bank is, probably second only to the Fed. They were doing something that was contradicting what the Fed was doing, and people started lambasting them, and they said, no, they are not Fed dependent. They're data dependent. Their own data is not showing them what the Fed data is showing. So nobody should expect them to follow suit what the Fed is doing. So in the same manner, for our central bank here in Nigeria, for the monetary authorities in Nigeria, is price stability, and anything else is secondary. Even in cases where you have dual mandate, I remember in the Fed, when prices were climbing in America, they were very aggressive, they were very hawkish. The way they were pushing, because they wanted to achieve price stability, and the Fed chief stated explicitly that any other thing is willing to sacrifice any other objective on the altar of price stability. So price stability is so important. I know as a central bank you have to be cautious, because while you're trying to do one thing, another thing might be hampered or might be harmed, right? So you have to be careful. There should be a method to whatever madness you think you're pushing, but the price stability is so overarching. And there are other ways. I know the angle you're coming from. Some will say, all right, you adopt other policies to boost economic growth, to attain full employment, and so on and so forth. The problem with that is it's very difficult to strike a balance, because when you're trying to boost growth, when you're trying to boost employment, it may undermine your capacity to achieve price stability. So you have to weigh and see. While you're trying to do that, to achieve growth and full employment, it should be done in such a way that price stability is not sacrificed, because price stability is first and foremost for any monetary authority anywhere in the world.
Exactly. And I'm talking about the price stability that the Central Bank of Nigeria under the Yemi Cardoso is following, because I noticed that this current CBN governor and his management are talking less about full employment, just like you have pointed out, but as rightly pointed also, for us to understand that the history and development of Nigerian Central Bank, it has always been maintaining that price stability as one of its core mandates. Now, let's now take a look at other core issue around today's MPC meeting, which most of us are expecting an outlook, an agenda from it, and a forward-looking policy from the central bank. Now, let's now take a look at the inflation challenge in Nigeria. Although you have highlighted in your earlier statement about the fiscal policy not doing as much to correspond to what the monetary policy is doing. But in this regard, food inflation has been a big challenge. And we know in the past, the former central bank management focused on food production, spent so much money on agricultural and the rest of them. But this current one is not taking a look at that. So in your own understanding, in the area of food inflation, what can the current CBN do to support the federal government of Nigeria?
Well, the last central bank management under Mr. Godwin Emefiele was so keen in pursuing unorthodox policies because they thought the orthodox policies were not yielding results, and they decided to embark on unorthodox policies. Sadly, it was a misadventure because they spent so much money with hardly anything to show for it. So, and because a central bank is not wired to be engaging in those things. So I like what Yemi Cardoso said. He said, it's not like they're ruling it out entirely, but they will work alongside others. People that really understand, like if you're talking about boosting food production, you have other departments of government that you can work with, instead of central bank trying to do that itself, because the central bank does not have the capacity to do that. So it's better off working alongside maybe Bank of Agriculture, maybe Ministry of Agriculture, and so on and so forth to achieve that. And that's where the synergy is very important. The central bank and the fiscal authority, mainly the Ministry of Finance, they have to meet halfway. Everybody has to do his own part because food production is not really within the remit of the central bank. We have to understand something. According to the greatest monetary economists, Milton Friedman, monetary policy is always and everywhere monetary in nature. And sometimes we seem to deny that because we say, all right, our inflation in Nigeria is not demand pull, it's cost push, it's because of cost of production, structural rigidities, and so on. But we deny the fact that there's always that monetary aspect. And even in Nigeria, because if you have noticed, the money supply is reaching unprecedented levels, despite the tightening by the central bank. That's to tell you that there's something that is not adding up. Because normally when you're hiking, when you're embarking on hawkish, when you have hawkish stance, you're embarking on contractionary monetary policy. The expectation is that money supply will come down and eventually inflation will be tackled. But they have been embarking on that. Throughout last year, they were very hawkish. In fact, it was this year that they started holding. But money supply kept climbing. So some of us feel it's because the fiscal side and the monetary side are working at cross purposes because of the deficit budgeting that we have been embarking upon. But the central bank needs to go back to the drawing board and understand what actually is the problem. There might be other issues that we may not realize now that is rendering the efforts to be completely ineffective because you're hawkish, you're making cost of credit very dear, but money supply keeps climbing, reaching unprecedented levels. So there's a disconnect somewhere. They need to find that disconnect. Apart from what some of us think to be the reason, there could be other reasons. And they need to find that reason, and then they need to plug that leakage so that their policies will be really effective. And when they're hiking rates, people should see inflation actually coming down.
Exactly. Now, talking about inflation coming down, and we can't talk about Nigerian inflation without looking at the global aspect. Global inflation is also there, scaring us on the face as we speak right now. But the geopolitical tension in Europe, as well as the trade war with China and US and the rest of them, also making an impact. But I know that the body language of the MPC members right now in the Central Bank of Nigeria quarter here in Abuja will definitely be looking at that activities on the global scale. But from your own angle, do you think this global issue will have a major impact on the decision of the MPC at the end of the meeting by tomorrow morning? Do you think that global impact or global issue will have major impact on that decision at the end of the day?
Normally, the Monetary Policy Committee looks at basically two things. The global happenings and then the domestic happenings.
Exactly.
And both of them are equally important because if you just dwell on what is happening within your economy, you're not an autarky, you're not North Korea. So by ignoring what is happening outside, you're not doing any favors to yourselves. So you need to really understand both, and you need to incorporate both into your decision making. So I feel both of them are equally important. The domestic happenings are very important, and then international happenings are very important. And I think they can heap a sigh of relief now with the trade war at least being suspended for now. You know, just a reprieve for maybe 90 days, according to President Trump. So it's not like they have finally resolved all the issues. So, and even the agreement they had, they just projected 90 days. They might not even reach 90 days and that. So one has to be circumspect. One has to be cautious. It's not yet the hoodoo on the international market. And even if the Ukrainian war, you see the game of chickens that the president of Russia, Putin, is playing. He really wants to have Ukraine. It's not from his actions, from his body language. He doesn't want the war to end, right? So even that one is not fully gone. So even though Donald Trump is doing everything humanly possible, even Zelensky is determined to have still, but Putin is a very stubborn person. So you cannot say that one is gone. So. And even other factors too are very important. You look at the Houthis and the attacks of ships in the Red Sea and so on, right? All these things are very important to the global economy, and everything has to be factored in before you can decide and say, all right, we have made a decision that we feel is going to be effective and is fully anchored on reality.
Exactly. Now, when you talk about all things need to be factored locally, domestically, I recall that the last MPC meeting, they put the issue of the last outing on the fuel fuel price in Nigeria. They also talk about domestic insecurity around our food corridor production, and they also talk about some basic issues that we know that normally affect Nigerian economy, particularly the structural deficit, power supply, and the rest of them. But in your own understanding, looking at the domestic happening right now, what do you think they will put out as reasons for them to take the decision they may take by tomorrow 8 a.m.?
Well, the factors are there. They're really overwhelming. And even for the last inflation. And by the way, some people tend to get this wrong. For the fact that inflation has gone from 24.23 to 23.71, that doesn't mean that prices are falling. It's just that there's this inflation. It's not like prices are falling. It's not like there's deflation. So you need to really understand that while there is acceleration, that means the pace at which prices are increasing might not be as fast as it was in March. That's comparing April's numbers. That doesn't mean the inflation is not climbing, and we are way off the target. The target is normally 6 to 9%. That's the standard for Nigeria. But for this year, the central bank is targeting 21. We're doing 23.71, which is still high. And mind you, the IMF is projecting even 26.5.
Exactly.
So we still have a long way to go. And most of these factors are contributing, whether it's the cost of energy, the cost of transportation, the insecurity, even the activities of middlemen, particularly for inflation for households. All these things are important, and everything must be done to tackle all these problems if we really want to bring price back to target and achieve price stability within the Nigerian economy.
Now, very interesting, Doc, from you. The perspective you are giving this discussion is making me to look beyond just the CBN MPC right now, because the federal government of Nigeria, through President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, also have his own eye on price stability, exchange rate, and the rest of them. But I will ask, because we have little time to round up the show, what will be your advice to the federal government of Nigeria? Because whatever decision that CBN will take by 8 a.m. tomorrow, everybody need to fall in line, particularly the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, organized private sector, everybody need to fall in line. But what will be your advice to the federal government of Nigeria, who has always been on the side of expansionary economic policy? Because MPC rate that they will be releasing tomorrow we must all work with it?
Well, my piece of advice to the federal government is that you cannot have your cake and eat it.
That's serious.
If you want to have 15, if you want to have 15% inflation rate this year, then you must meet the monetary authorities halfway in trying to tackle inflation. You cannot have arguably the largest budget in nominal terms this year and still be saying that inflation is coming down to 15%. Despite the change in methodology, if not for the change in methodology, inflation would have been far higher. Despite the change in methodology, 15% is not achievable. And I think that lies squarely with the federal government because of its expansionary budget. So you cannot have it both ways. If it's one thing you want, you proceed with all vigor. If you're trying to achieve expansionary budget because you cannot wait to do a lot of things, then you can have that one, but inflation will go haywire. So the choice is yours to make.
Very interesting, Dr. Simon. I really want to thank you for coming on the show today. And it's quite interesting that you brought a perspective, a very deep, microeconomic analytical perspective to this discussion, particularly for us to understand that CBN, their core mandate is to bring about price stability. Even though full employment is part of their work, but price stability is the key. On the other hand, it also makes us understand the aspect of what federal government need to do. Expansionary policy, although it's good on its own, but it's very contradictory to monetary policy. Doctor, this is a good one from you, and I really appreciate you for coming on the show this day.
Thank you for having me.
So, but hopefully we may have to call you back maybe soon. When we hear the latest from CBN, we have to hit the ground running, and you give us a perspective on it, sir. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day over there.